A lot of times when you're implementing the calling that God's placed in your heart, we say stuff like, I'm waiting on God, or I'm praying for directions. However, if God is actually giving you direction, the goal is to go forward and not hold back on what you're called to do. Too many believers are tiptoeing down the road they're calling because they're afraid of making a mistake or fearful they're being greedy. This timidness is hindering or slowing down the success and reducing the magnitude of your success. In today's message, we'll be digging into this concept, and we'll begin by looking at this ideal that when you already have direction, just go ahead and go forward. Let's look at Exodus 14, verses 13 and 36. And some context before we get started. This is when Moses was leading the people out of Egypt, and the Egyptians were chasing them, and they're in dire straits, and there is a sea in front of them. So let's begin in verse 13. And Moses said unto the people, Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. So it sounds like a great prayer. He's crying out to God. He's energizing the people that God's about to fight this battle. Let's look at verse 14. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. Sounds good again, right? So he's putting the spotlight on God. God will do all this great stuff. Look at verse 15. And the Lord said unto Moses, Wherefore criest thee unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. But lift up thy rod and stretch out thy hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry land through the midst of the sea. Okay, so there was this big scene of the Egyptians were chasing them. There's a sea in front of them, and Moses making this great prayer. But God said, why are you praying to me? Why are you crying to me? Tell the people to go forward. See, Moses had already had given direction to lead the people out of Egypt. God had already given the staff. So Moses' job was just to go forward. He didn't need to wait for any additional instructions. And so God's like, why are you crying to me? Just go forward. So in the same way, once you kind of know what you're called to do and you got your path laid out, you really just got to go forward and do what God has called you to do. And I use this other term of don't tiptoe around your calling. When the Israelites was coming into the promised land to take their possession, they didn't come in quietly. They didn't tiptoe into their promise. Look at Joshua 3, verses 14 and 17. So the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. It was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks. But as soon as the feet of the priests were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began back up a great distance away at a town called Adam, which is near Zathon. And the water below that point flowed onto the Dead Sea until the riverbank was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Meanwhile, the priests who were carrying the ark of the Lord's covenant stood on dry ground in the middle of the riverbed as the people passed by. They waited there until the whole nation of Israel had crossed the Jordan on dry land. So the first act that Israel did as they was going into the promised land, they parted the Jordan. And it was not like a small river here. It said it was overflowing its banks. So this was a lot of water, and it parted, and they walked over on dry land. And guess what? This act was not a quiet act. The inhabitants of the promised land, they heard about it, and they were fearful. Look at Joshua 1:5. And it came to pass when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel until we were passed over, that their heart melted, neither was there a spirit in them anymore because of the children of Israel. So Israel did not come into the promised land into what they was called to do quietly. They parted the Jordan as their first act into what they was called to do. And it was so spectacular that the people they was about to fight, they was already afraid before they even got to the battle. And even their first battle was hardcore, and it left no doubt that God was with them. Let's look at Joshua 6, verses 20 and 21. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horn, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. They completely destroyed everything in it with their sword, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, goats, and donkeys. So their first battle was a victorious battle, and it wasn't quiet. They didn't tiptoe into Jericho. The walls came crushing down with a loud sound after they marched around this thing 7 times, and they did it for 7 days. So this was not like they tiptoed into what God has called them to do. And so my encouragement, what I'm trying to get to you is this ideal of don't hold back on what God has called you to do. Just go in the direction that God's called you to do, and don't worry about trying to make a mistake. If you're going to make a mistake, God can help you correct it. But you don't have to tiptoe into what God has called you to do. Just go at it and don't hold back, and really take as much of your calling as you desire. Let's look at Joshua 18, near the end of the campaign to take over the promised land. We'll look at verses 1 and 3. Now that the land was under the Israelites' control, the entire community of Israel gathered at Shiloh and set upon the tabernacle. But there remained 7 tribes who had not yet allotted their grant of land. Then Joshua asked them, how long are you going to wait before taking possession of the remaining land the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given to you? So this group of Israelites, they hadn't received the full inheritance of of their land. Instead of Joshua saying, oh, poor you, he's saying, what are you guys waiting for? Go take what God has promised you. So in the same way, when God is giving direction, he's telling you what your calling is. He's giving you the vision, and you're wondering, like, how come it's not that successful? How come I get a little bit of success? What are you holding back? How come you haven't taken the fullness of what God has called you to do? In the same way, these Israelites was kind of waiting, and Joshua had to say, hey, what are you guys waiting on? Go take the possession that God has already given to you. A lot of times when we say stuff like, I'm praying about it, I'm waiting on God, those can really be delay tactics because we're afraid to really stepping in to what God has called us to do. So my encouragement with this lesson that I'm ministering today is this idea to showing you that when God has already given you direction, instead of waiting on him, he's already empowered you to go in this particular direction. So go down that way and don't hold back on what God has called you to do, because God desires for you to take your promised land and not to take a little, but take a lot, and take really as much as you want of what God has promised you. That concludes today's daily word, and I pray that it was a blessing to you. Before we wrap up, if the Holy Spirit is speaking to your spirit to partner with Church for Entrepreneurs, go to churchforentrepreneurs.com/partner. And if you want to connect with our ministry more, go to churchforentrepreneurs.com and join our online community. You guys be blessed, and I'll talk to you soon.